is it fair to say that the US pushed Europe into this Ukraine conflict?
Um, well, it seems to be a joint enterprise. I think it really is. There were, certain European countries have always been very anti-Russian. And, we know which ones those are: the Baltics, Poland, and the UK. And we could see an example of, shortly after the SMO began, um, peace negotiations began. Almost actually on the same day, Putin contacted Zelensky and they began negotiations, right? And then we got the Istanbul Agreement. Um, but it seems that it was actually both the UK and the US that tore that up, that convinced Zelensky to withdraw from it and to pursue war against Russia. Um, so I would have to say that it wasn't that you had an unwilling Europe. That unfortunately much of Europe was all too willing to engage in this. I would say it was a joint enterprise.
Okay, because I was just wondering, like, to me, I wonder how much of a foreign policy does Europe really have, or is its foreign
Yeah,
policy really just dictated by the United
yeah.
States?
Well, yeah, that's
And
that's part of the problem. Yeah, it's a big part of the problem. It's just that the Europeans, when the European Union was first created, or in the lead up to it, there was a lot of excited talk about how Europe could be sovereign. We could be an independent power. We wouldn't have to bow down to the U.S. And that was part of the justification for it. Say before we're divided, as individual countries, each one of us is much weaker than the U.S. and we just simply didn't have our say on the world stage. But if we are united, we become actually, we'll have a greater population than the U.S. Our economy altogether, I think, will be larger than the U.S. We become a great power on the world stage. But that's not what happened. Yeah, it's actually the U.S. took advantage of the centralization of European authority to really bow Europe to its will, and the Europeans were willing accomplices in this. There was very little resistance. There was some initially, like from countries like France, but that evaporated, and now they've all become kind of just say willing vassals of the United States.
right, it just it's surprising to me because I think that it is fair to say that the U.S. dictates foreign policy for the EU,
Yeah,
and that we were the leader into this conflict in Ukraine. And sure, lots there were Russophobes at the top, and they went along willingly. But now we have Trump, who's clearly trying to change the whole conflict in Ukraine, wanting to end it. But you have the Europeans that are refusing, that are
hmm,
scared. They don't want this to end. But shouldn't they be breathing a sigh of relief? It's like this whole conflict has brought us
right.
such a disaster. Our economies
Yeah,
are in tatters. Our popularity for
yeah,
politicians is just down at a single digits or low double digits. It's clearly not a good thing for Europe. It's not a good thing for the politicians. So you think
yeah,
that if Trump comes along and says, "Let's end this," that they should breathe a sigh of relief, like,
right,
thank goodness. Yes, this has been horrendous for us. Let's
right.
don't do this. Why is that not the case? Instead, you have the Europeans that seem to be more gung ho, like, no, no, Trump, don't end this. We got to
Yeah,
keep it going.
yeah. Well, I think there may be a couple things. It's just that first of all, these European governments are just fully signed up for U.S. led global hegemony. It's something that they really believe in, and um, a U.S. government that turned away from that, leaves them abandoned. It first of all goes against this. It's in violation of these principles they've come to hold dear. It's an abandonment of the crusade that they've signed up for. So that's one thing. And then also just the very fact that the U.S. might pull back scares them. They want the U.S. to be there. Uh, they feel incapable of really sort of plotting their own course. They've just become these creatures, these subordinate creatures, and yeah, seem to be incapable of actually standing up for themselves. Now, of course, this is something that many Europeans outside of the establishment are have recognized, and it's really fed again these populist movements. And like most recent, there are going to be elections in Germany in just about a month. Um, it looks unfortunately that the CDU, the Christian Democrats, are likely to win, but they won't have anything close to a majority, and that the party that will come in second will be the AfD. And the AfD has been increasing in popularity, through the course of this of the election campaigns. And Sarah Wagenknecht's party is also, they started from zero not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, but they're already, and it was thought that they couldn't maybe even reach the 5% threshold to become part of the parliament. But they're doing quite well too, and they are increasing in popularity. They're now at 7%. So like between the AfD and Sarah Wagenknecht's party, I think they call it the SWB, is they have about a third of the votes in Germany, which is quite significant. And you find something very similar, of course, in France. Maybe even if you added up all the anti-hegemonic votes that are cast in France, it might be even higher, I think, than that. So there clearly is a groundswell of protest against this, but these governments seem to be utterly incapable of actually plotting a new course, and they're just terrified by the idea that they might have to. And their reaction is not, okay, let's reflect, maybe we should make some changes. No, they simply double down and they just shriek louder.
It's insane. You say that, the European leaders, they're just incapable of standing up for themselves, but in a way they're standing up for themselves now against Trump, because why don't they get behind this agenda that Trump's leading the foreign policy?
Yeah,
you're supposed to just be vassals. Why can't you be a good little vassal now when it comes to ending the conflict?
I guess that what it shows is that they're above all vassals to U.S.-led Western hegemony. And so if you have a traitor like Trump, they perceive him as a traitor. This is something that said, hey, no, you're not the real king. We need our real king. Come back. Somebody like, that Biden character.
So is there do you think there's a real sort of globalist agenda out there? Like that there's something else in charge, a cabal, or is that just or just this deep state machine that's been built that just kind of keeps on moving forward?
Yeah. No, I don't think that you can actually find like one room where the leaders of this are gathered and they plot. It's nothing like that.
Not like the World Economic Forum.
Yeah. Obviously those institutions are part of that. I mean, they're clearly important cogs in the machine, or whatever you might want to say, but it's much larger than that. I think you have to say, above all, if you want to look at its center, it is the U.S. It's the deep state in the U.S. It's like the U.S. State Department, and they have been exerting pressure over the course of decades, particularly on Europe, and they've succeeded in transforming European political culture. European political culture used to be much more diverse, but this is also, the Europeans themselves. They decided to go down this road of unification to the European Union. And so that, the old Europe was really quite diverse. You had very different kinds of policies and different kinds of political cultures in different countries. But it's become much more monochrome since the rise of the European Union. And then it's just made it all the easier for the United States to impose its will on Europe and to transform it. There was always those pressures, even well before the European Union. The CIA, the U.S. was always exerting pressure on Europe, pushing them away from dangerous parties like the communist parties in Italy or France, and towards their approved parties. And they had their tentacles in European media. I think like virtually every German publication had some sort of CIA contact. Over time, that's really had an effect. So now Europe has become a creature of the United States. Now, obviously, not all Europeans are happy about this, but their governments are. That's the only kind of politics that they know at this time.
Right. When we see the rise of these parties like the AfD, Sarah Wagenknecht's party, the National Front, George Gogescu in Romania,
Right.
do you see these people as wanting to ally themselves with Trump, or is there more of kind of a rejection of the United States foreign policy and we're thrown off the shackles? You don't tell us what to do, or is it kind of?
I think it's much deeper than that. In general, they're happy with Trump. I know Viktor Orban considers Trump a friend and a close ally, but I think they probably will find that Trump is an unreliable ally. That in some cases he helps them, and I think we all have to be grateful for that. We've just pointed out the times where he undermines the narrative. That's important. If that's all he does, it's still a success, a significant success. But I think they'll find that he falls far short of their own objectives. So they'll intelligent politicians find allies where they can, and where they find common cause they support it. And in some cases they'll have common cause with Trump, and that's all well and good, but I believe that these parties are, principled. They're not just Trump worshipers. They're not, MAGA fans. And where Trump fails them, they'll continue to pursue the course that they've set out for a new Europe.
Okay, well, that's hopeful. Yeah, we'll see. Like I said, a month for the election in Germany, that could send shockwaves. I also saw that in Romania, Gorgescu has increased in popularity by like 10% after they annul the first election. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. If they're going to just try to remove him from the ballot, you could start having real riots in Romania. It's Europe is changing, and there's sometimes it takes horrible things for change to happen. That you just get become complacent in the way of things, and then you don't realize that you've sort of slipped into this abyss.
Yeah.
And so, as awful as everything is, let's hope that some good positive can come out of it.
Right. I actually am reasonably hopeful for Europe, not in the short term, maybe not even the medium term, but in the long term. It's just that there, these parties that are rising in different countries seem to really, first of all, they're real parties, and they seem to have a real understanding of the problems and where Europe went off track. And as I've said a few times, unfortunately, we have this very interesting character of Trump at the top, but we don't really have a party that. But Trump himself, I don't think, he has his kind of. I think he has good instincts on a lot of issues, but he doesn't have either the intellectual discipline or maybe ability to really grasp what the reality is, and chart a course in a consistent and coherent way. I don't think he's really capable of that. He can punch holes in the walls that the globalists built up. You can do some real damage to them, but I don't see ability to really construct a new order. But maybe he's just sort of he's a stage. He's the current phase, and this is who we need at this point. He's this chaos bomb that's going off, and it's clear that he's already done a great deal of damage to the establishment and to the deep state. And maybe that's his role in history. And when we look back at it, that's what we'll see. And then, then later on, we'll find some sort of party that is more similar to what we see in places in Europe. Well, I hope so. I don't see any signs of it now, but maybe that's what will happen.